Good morning all. Today we are going to learn about transport of respiratory gases. So the respiratory gases are the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the contents involved in this topic are the introduction, diffusion of gases, transport of oxygen, transport of carbon dioxide, and respiratory exchange ratio. So diffusion of respiratory gases, it includes respiratory membrane, diffusion of oxygen across respiratory membrane, diffusion of oxygen from peripheral capillaries into tissue fluid, diffusion of carbon dioxide from tissue fluid into peripheral capillaries, diffusion of carbon dioxide across respiratory membrane. This is about the concentration of each gases in inspired air, expired air, then veins, arteries, and tissues. First is about the inspired air. So the partial pressure of oxygen in inspired air is 158 mmHg and carbon dioxide is 0.3 mmHg. Then water is 5.7. Then nitrogen is about 596 mmHg. And in the case of expired air, oxygen is 116 mmHg, carbon dioxide 32 mmHg, water is 47, and nitrogen is about 565 mmHg. The case of vein, oxygen is about 40 mmHg, carbon dioxide 46 mmHg, water 47, and nitrogen 573 mmHg. In the case of arteries, oxygen 95 mmHg, carbon dioxide 40 mmHg, water 47, and nitrogen 573 mmHg. And in the tissues, oxygen is about 40 mmHg, carbon dioxide 46 mmHg, water 47, nitrogen is again 573 mmHg. Next is about the respiratory membrane. Respiratory membrane is a membrane through which gaseous exchange takes place. So gases are exchanged in between alveolar air and blood in the capillaries. So oxygen is transported from the lungs to the alveoli. Lungs to the blood. So oxygen is diffuses from the alveolar air into the blood in the capillaries, and carbon dioxide is a base product, and it is diffused from the tissues and it enters the capillary blood. So carbon dioxide is diffuses from the capillary blood into the alveolar air. So respiratory membrane is a membrane through which gaseous exchange takes place. So it consists of alveolar epithelium, there is a basement membrane, and capillary endothelium. So these are the three main parts of respiratory membrane: alveolar epithelium, basement membrane, and capillary endothelium. The next is about the transport of oxygen. So oxygen is transported through blood in two important methods or two important ways. So the first way of oxygen transport is by combining with hemoglobin or as oxyhemoglobin. So 97% of oxygen is transported as oxyhemoglobin, and the rest 3% is transported in the dissolved state. Dissolved state, it is otherwise called as in physical solution, that is dissolved in plasma of the blood, and oxygen is transported. Next is about the distribution of oxygen in the body. So the partial pressure PO2 is a partial pressure of oxygen and oxygen content. So PO2, partial pressure of oxygen in the inspired air is 158 mmHg. And the oxygen content is about 21 ml per deciliter. In the expired air, the partial pressure of oxygen is 116 and the oxygen content is about 16 ml per deciliter. In the alveolar air, PO2 is 100 to 104 mmHg and the oxygen content is about 13 to 14 ml per deciliter. And in the case of arterial blood, PO2 is 98 to 100 mmHg and the oxygen content is about 19 ml. And in the case of venous blood, PO2 is about 40 mmHg and the oxygen content is about 14 ml. So the important way of oxygen transport is in combination with hemoglobin or the transport of oxygen as hemoglobin. So in this type of transport, it is clear that the association of hemoglobin association of oxygen with hemoglobin or the relationship between oxygen and hemoglobin is very, very important. Its relationship means the relationship with oxygen the relationship of oxygen with hemoglobin means the association of oxygen with hemoglobin and dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin. That's the meaning of their relationship. And this is best studied by using a curve. Its name is oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. And we get the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve by plotting partial pressure of oxygen along x-axis and percentage saturation of hemoglobin along y-axis. And the oxygen hemoglobin curve is a sigmoid curve. And from this graph, it is clear that when the partial pressure of oxygen, when it is 10 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 13.5%. That is, dissolved oxygen in ml per deciliter is about 0.03 ml per deciliter. And when the partial pressure of oxygen, when it is 20 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 35%. So the amount of dissolved oxygen is 0.06 ml per deciliter. And if the partial pressure of oxygen is 30 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 57%. That is, dissolved state, it is 0.09 ml per deciliter. When PO2 is 40 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 75%. And the dissolved oxygen is 0.12 ml per deciliter. When PO2 is 50 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 75%. And the dissolved oxygen is 0.15 ml per deciliter. When PO2 is 50 mmHg, the percentage saturation is 83.5% and the dissolved oxygen is 0.18. Sorry, in this case, in 50 in the case of 60 mmHg, the percentage saturation is 89 and the dissolved state is 0.18. And when the PO2 is 70 mmHg, percentage saturation is 92.7% and the dissolved oxygen is 0.21 ml per deciliter. When PO2 is 80, the percentage saturation is 94.5% and the dissolved oxygen is 0.24 ml per deciliter. And when PO2 is 90 mmHg, percentage saturation is 96.5% and the dissolved oxygen is 0.27 ml per deciliter. When PO2 is 100 mmHg, the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is 97.5% and dissolved oxygen is about 0.30 ml per deciliter. So about the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, from you all know that it is a sigmoid curve or it is a S-shaped curve. It is in the shape of alphabet S. and you can find out the P50 from that graph. Then you will get Bohr effect. So the association or the relationship with oxygen and hemoglobin is affected by various factors. So that means the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is affected by some factors. These are the various factors affecting the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. They are the concentration of H plus ions. So concentration of H plus ions means it is when the concentration of H plus ions increases, that means acidity. It is a condition known as acidity. Increased concentration of H plus ions is known as acidity. Then carbon dioxide is a factor. When this the condition in which carbon dioxide increases is known as hypercapnia. Then temperature, then BPG. BPG is another factor. Then pH. pH means acidity or alkalinity. pH, then exercise, myoglobin, and fetal hemoglobin, HbF. These are the various factors affecting oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve or their association and dissociation. The association of oxygen with hemoglobin and dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin. So increase or decrease of the above mentioned factors shifts curve to right, and some factors shifts the curve to left. So when some factors increases, the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve shifts to right. When some factors decreases, oxygen hemoglobin curve shifts to left. So this in this slide you can see the factors which shifts the curve to right. The factors which shifts the oxygen hemoglobin curve to right are increased hydrogen ions, H plus ions, increased carbon dioxide, that condition is known as hypercapnia, then increased temperature and increased BPG. And the factors which shifts the curve to left, the opposite of these factors. That means decreased H plus ion concentration, decreased carbon dioxide, decreased temperature, and decreased BPG. And one of the important factor which affects oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is partial pressure of oxygen. Partial pressure, that is PO2. PO2 is the most important factor which affects oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. When partial pressure of oxygen increases, the curve shifts to left, and when partial pressure of oxygen decreases, the curve shifts to right, the opposite of the actions of these factors. That is the action of oxygen PO2. PO2 on oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. This graph shows the affinity of hemoglobin with oxygen and also myoglobin with oxygen. So from this graph, it is clear that the myoglobin has strong affinity towards hemoglobin, towards oxygen than hemoglobin. Then transport of oxygen in dissolved state. That means oxygen is transported by dissolving in the plasma of the blood. This method of transport means in dissolved state means oxygen dissolved in the plasma of the blood and oxygen is transported towards the tissues. So only 3% of oxygen is transported in dissolved state. The next is transport of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a metabolic waste product. So carbon dioxide is formed in the tissue as a waste product, which is formed after metabolism. So as it is a waste, we have to eliminate the waste thing from our body. So tissues are the part which produces half carbon dioxide. So from the tissues, carbon dioxide are transported into the blood. From the blood, it is then diffuses. Carbon dioxide is diffuses into the lungs. From the lungs, it is expired out. This is how carbon dioxide is expired out. So the transport of carbon dioxide means how the carbon dioxide is transported through blood. Actually, carbon dioxide has to travel from the tissues towards the alveolar air. So the methods of ways of transport of carbon dioxide are as bicarbonate ions, as carbamino compounds, and as dissolved state. As bicarbonate ions, this is the most important method of transportation of carbon dioxide through blood. So 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate ions. So carbon dioxide is converted into HCO3 minus ions, and in this form carbon dioxide from the blood, carbon dioxide is transported through the blood and reaches the lungs. Then as carbamino compounds, carb means carbon dioxide, amino means amino acids. So carbon dioxide combines with some of the amino acids of the blood, some proteins in the blood, and also the hemoglobin in the blood. So hemoglobin is also a protein. So carbon dioxide combines with amino acids, some proteins, and also with hemoglobin and forms carbamino compounds. So transportation of carbon dioxide is carbamino compounds is by this way, by combining with amino acids, combining with proteins, and also combining with hemoglobin. That combination of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin is known as carbamino hemoglobin. So 23% of carbon dioxide is transported as carbamino compounds. Then third one is only 7%, that is like oxygen in dissolved state, that or it is otherwise called as in physical solution. So carbon dioxide dissolved in the plasma of the blood, and this is then transported towards tissues. This is the explanation of transportation of carbon dioxide as bicarbonate ions. So the amount of carbon dioxide transported as bicarbonate ions is 70%. So you can see cell in the slide. So inside the cell, by some metabolic processes, carbon dioxide is eliminated as waste product. This waste is diffuses from the cell, tissues into the interstitial blood. From there, into the carbon dioxide diffuses into the plasma of the blood. From the plasma of the blood, carbon dioxide diffuses into the red blood cell. In the RBC, carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid. This carbonic acid is highly unstable. So it splits into SO3 minus ions and H plus ions. This HCO, now the carbon dioxide is converted into HCO3 minus ions. Carbon dioxide from the cell enters the RBC of the tissue capillary blood, and in the RBC of tissue capillary blood, carbon dioxide combines with water and forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid splits into HCO3 minus ions and H plus ions. Now the carbon dioxide is in the form of HCO3 minus ions. This is then diffuses into the plasma of the tissue capillary blood. And in the tissue capillary RBC, the hemoglobin is present. This H plus combines with hemoglobin to form HHB. Then the HCO3 minus is now present in the plasma of tissue capillary blood. So in exchange of HCO3 minus ions, A minus ions Cl minus ions. A negative ion called Cl minus ions shifted into the RBC in order to maintain the electrical neutrality there. This shifting of chloride ions from the plasma of tissue capillary blood into the RBC of tissue capillary blood is known as chloride shift. Now carbon dioxide is in the form of SO3 minus ions, and this is then transported through the tissue capillary blood, and it enters the tissue pulmonary capillary blood. So in the pulmonary capillary blood, the reverse of this reactions takes place in pulmonary capillary blood. In the pulmonary capillary blood, the SO3 minus ions from the plasma of pulmonary capillary blood enters back to the RBC. So there is no need of Cl minus ions there. So Cl minus ions shifted back into the RBC of pulmonary capillary blood. This process is known as reverse chloride shift. And the SO3 minus ions combines with H plus ions there. So the H plus ions are coming from the HHB is present. The HHB splits into H plus ions and hemoglobin. So in the pulmonary capillary blood, oxygenation happens. So when oxygen enters RBC of pulmonary capillary blood, this HHB releases H plus ions, and that oxygen combines with hemoglobin. Now H plus ion is free. So the entered SO3 minus ions combines with H plus to form H2CO3, carbonic acid. This is highly unstable, so it splits into water and carbon dioxide. Now SO3 minus ion is converted back to carbon dioxide, or carbon dioxide get its original chemical formula. Now carbon dioxide is in the RBC of tissue, pulmonary capillary blood. Now carbon dioxide from the RBC of pulmonary capillary blood diffuses into the plasma of pulmonary capillary blood. From there into the alveolar air. So inside the carbon dioxide is now present inside the alveoli. From the alveoli, it is then excreted. It is then expired out. This is how carbon dioxide is transported through blood. The next is about the pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary capillaries are larger in diameter and have multiple anastomosis. Each alveolus is surrounded by a capillary basket. Pulmonary blood vessels with blood in them constitute about 40% of the total body weight of lungs. About the functions of pulmonary circulation. The main functions of pulmonary circulation are gas exchange, serves as filter, that is filter thrombi and emboli, pulmonary endothelial cells, which releases fibrinolytic agents, prevent thrombi and emboli. Then metabolic functions, it helps in the metabolism of ACE, bradykinin, serotonin, prostaglandin E1, E2, F2 alpha. It is a blood reservoir. Then about the special features of pulmonary circulation is low pressure, low resistance system. It consists of pulmonary artery, shorter, wider, thin wall, more compliant. Then pulmonary arteriole is thin walled, less smooth muscles are present, so less ability to constrict. Low vascular resistance. Pulmonary vascular resistance walls with increased arteriolar pressure. Pulmonary vascular resistance falls with increased arteriolar pressure. This is due to capillary distension, capillary recruitment, and significance is adequate time for gaseous exchange, increased capillary surface area facilitates diffusion of gas, and it prevents pulmonary edema. Pulmonary blood flow, 500 ml, that is about 10%. In pulmonary arteries, it is about 150 ml. In pulmonary veins, it is about 270 ml. And in pulmonary arteries, it is about 80 ml. And the blood flows in upright posture. Blood flows increases from apex to base of lungs. Factors affecting pulmonary blood flow: pulmonary vascular resistance, gravity, alveolar pressure, arterial to venous pressure gradient. Pulmonary vascular resistance. The factors affecting pulmonary vascular resistance: lung volumes, hormones such as serotonin, norepinephrine, histamine, thromboxane A2, vasoconstrictors, adenosine, acetylcholine, PG, prostaglandins, isoproteineol, proterenol, vasodilators. The oxygen tension, that is hypoxia, leads to vasoconstriction. Then about the effect of gravity, it is due to effect of gravity in upright posture. Pulmonary blood flow increases from apex to base of the lungs. And ABP at the level of lung is 14 mmHg. Apex of the lung is about 6.6 mmHg. And base of the lung is about 17.7 mmHg. Zone 1 is well ventilated, not well perfused. It increases alveolar dead space. Zone 1 is usually small and non-existent in healthy individuals. In hemorrhagic shock, zone 1 is increased. Then zone 2, arterial and capillary pressure exceed alveolar pressure, pulmonary venous pressure less than alveolar pressure, waterfall effect. Zone 3, in zone 3, alveolar pressure is lower than pressure in all capillaries. Then regulation of pulmonary blood flow. Active factors are the neural regulation, hormonal regulation, and chemical regulation. Passive factors are the cardiac output, gravity, and lung volumes. Then about the filtration across pulmonary capillaries, it is affected by hydrostatic and osmotic pressure gradients. There is a role of alveolar surface tension and also role of lymphatics. That's all about pulmonary circulation, about the transport of oxygen and transport of carbon dioxide. Thank you.